And welcome to a new episode of Dynasty Mind. My name is Chris Chung at FF Dynasty 101. This is a feature of Fake Pigskin Dynasty Mind. And through my series, I am hoping to just dig into the Dynasty Mind of a lot of great presence on Twitter and in the fantasy realm in the Dynasty. And tonight I am joined by Bobby Koch. You all know him, Bobby Koch, right?
Yep, that's right.
Awesome. I should have asked for that name before I introduced you. Bobby, you are at Rect Fantasy on Twitter. I think this year has been particularly going well for you both on Twitter as well as in life. How are you doing tonight?
Yeah, I'm doing great. And as you mentioned, I can't complain. In the past year, I've gotten married, I got into business school, and I started writing for Dynasty League football. So things have been going pretty well.
Excellent. Dynasty League Football is a collection of awesome writers. I've watched them grow, and they've certainly added a lot of, able to identify a lot of talented writers and talented minds such as yourself. And tonight I have the pleasure of just having you on to discuss Dynasty before you're off to the graduate life. But before we get there, we have to just get people to understand why you love Blake Bortles so much and where are you headed with your Dynasty teams. So let me dig in a little bit for yourself. I'm sure you've introduced yourself quite a few times on podcasts, but for tonight, I want to know, how did you get from just being a typical fantasy football player to a Dynasty owner and now a Dynasty writer?
Yeah, so I started a while ago playing redraft. My friend Zach, who's also a writer at DLF, got me into redraft fantasy football. And in my very first year, I ended up winning. And so instantly I thought, oh, this game is so easy. I can't believe it. And then, of course, from then on, I realized it was a little bit harder than I thought. But I started looking for more and more challenges. And then Zach started a Dynasty League. And from there, I learned how to play Dynasty. And I started out by writing articles about the teams in my league just because I was super bored. So I'd write like, oh, this team's looking good for the playoffs this year because they have Blake Bortles, and I love Blake Bortles, and let me break down the stats of Blake Bortles. And it just sort of took off from there to the point where I worked for a site back in 2014 and started to dive into Dynasty writing a bit, but really got into it right before I started writing for DLF and was actually writing for my friend Zach's blog, and DLF noticed it and asked us both to write for them.
And that's awesome. That's quite a quick transition from 2014 all the way now to 2018. So 4 years of experience. And when was your Twitter presence like it exploded? I know this year, I know it exploded a lot more, but I think you've been here longer than people realize.
So I've been around since 2014. That's when I created the account. It got some following then, and then I ended up at a full-time job where I was working 60-hour weeks or close to. So I took a step back from fantasy writing and tweeting too much. And then I came back around the same time pretty much that I quit that job. And that's also around the same time that I ended up writing for DLF. So it all just kind of came together. And I think people think that I met existence around 2017, but I've been on Twitter since 2014, just a little more quieter than I've been in the past year.
And that's awesome to have you, and knowing to hear you speak, hear you drop nuggets. People get to benefit from your wisdom, and you've been around a lot of different pod. I know you've been in our Fake Pigskin Open Bar, and Afterburner. Is it Afterburner? I'm sorry.
Yep, the Afterburners podcast is my podcast I host with my friend Sam.
Mm-hmm. And that's awesome.
And also we just have fun.
Awesome. So throughout all these years then, Bobby, what have you noticed about how your process, how you've approached Dynasty, how it evolved, and how did you continue to shape it?
So I guess, and this is something I think all new Dynasty owners experience, in the first year or two, it seems like everyone's youth obsessed because they think, I'm going to own this guy for the next 10 years and he's going to be on my team. And I really need to make sure he's like 21, because if he's going to be on my team for the next 10 years, he has to be as young as possible and he has to have the most upside. And then you play for a few years and you realize eventually, if you're like me at least, you love trading. And so there's almost no one who ends up on your roster for more than 2 or 3 years. And I looked at it recently. My original Dynasty startup, I have 2 players from that startup of 26 drafted players. So it's definitely the case where I've now shifted more to yeah, you want to sell me your old veterans who are productive and will probably be productive for another few years? I'll take them on my team and win a few championships and balance out my youth while you continue to chase those young upside guys. And the lesson was particularly learned when I traded a bunch of stuff for Doyle Green Beckham in different leagues. And that really just taught me a lesson very quickly.
Oh man, that is a personal sore spot for me because I was banging the table for DGB. I know the youth was exploding back then. I think you remember around 2014, 2015, all these talks about age-related production and that you have to get your players as young as possible. If there any birthday that happened when they hit 25, it's time to sell. And, I got all kinds of confused because on the one hand I want to keep these players for a long time, and then on the other hand I needed them to be as young as possible, and it became such a sort of a I don't know what it's called, but this bubble where everyone wanted to go get the exact same profile of players, and that left very little ways to trade for them or acquire them. The only way to acquire them is if you acquire draft picks, and draft picks of course exploded in value. So it's from what I hear, then you are one of the first few to notice not this is not the most effective way of playing Dynasty for on one hand, and is something that you can exploit.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And wouldn't even say I'm one of the first few. You hear it more and more from a bunch of guys on Twitter these days. They talk about the productive veterans. And I think there seems to be a shift where I think right before the 2014 class, people were talking about the productive veterans. Then the 2014 class happened, and suddenly everybody wanted the next Odell Beckham or Mike Evans or whoever it was. And so everybody was chasing that youth. And now it's gone the opposite way where we've had a few disappointing wide receiver classes in terms of rookies. So everyone's going, oh, maybe I should get the older the older veteran wide receivers. Although rookie running backs have worked out very well for pretty much everyone lately.
Absolutely, it seems to come in a cycle, but the game is also changing to more of a pass happy. In the past, I remember the times when we want the bell cow, and then now we're looking for those who have the touches, and the third down backs become value now again. But it also helps that a talented crop of rookie running backs have entered the league, and tonight we get to see a little glimpse of those. Even just Saquon, that amazing run. I saw Darius Geis before he went down. He had one that was called back. And so we see the game evolving, and we're evolving along with it, and that requires us to just kind of change our approach sometimes. What is one of the biggest lessons that you've taken and it just applied to yourselves year after year?
Yeah. So as I mentioned earlier, I really like to trade. And I think trading is probably my favorite part of playing Dynasty because I like the negotiations. I like getting to know how other owners like to negotiate. But something I've learned is you shouldn't always trade just for the sake of trading. And what I'll mean is I would used to get bored. So I'd be like, oh, yeah, I'll make this guy an offer just because I'm bored. And I'd give away like a really talented player for not peanuts, but something that I probably shouldn't have been doing because it didn't make a ton of sense for my team. But I was like, yeah, I'm bored. I'm going to make this trade. I'll do it anyway. And this offseason, I noticed I made a lot less trades, but it's also because in most of my leagues, I've been in them for a few years. So I've managed to shape my rosters with players I generally like. And there definitely was that itch like, oh, you're not trading this offseason. You're not improving your team. But I looked at it and I went, sometimes it's the trade you don't make that improves your team.
Absolutely. I've been there myself, having that need for either the new buzz that you hear. It's been a long off season, and you hear some sparkle of news, and then you're projecting upside in your head, and now you're trading a proven veteran for upside that may or may not be realized.
Yeah, absolutely.
A lesson that I hope everyone learns. And with that said, if you were to look at through the years, observing others, observing yourself, what has been one of the more common mistakes you see owners approaching fantasy football and dynasty?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I guess the most common mistake I have seen would be people selling too early or just what I'd call impatience. So I'm guilty of it too. For example, I gave up on Devontae Adams after his freshman year, and I'm now kicking myself because I went, oh, he's full of drops and he's never going to be the guy. But the thing is, we have seen these late breakouts, and I mentioned the 2014 class earlier, and everyone wants to see now those guys who break out right away, like Odell Beckham, and it just doesn't happen. If you look at all the stats that are out there, it does seem to suggest that most guys do follow a career path of 3 years out is when you expect a breakout, and not everyone is going to be Odell Beckham, who's a generational talent. So I've just seen people give up too early, and what I would advocate is if you really think a player is talented, be patient with them. You give them at least 2 to 3 seasons to really acclimate to the league before you start selling low on them at all.
Mm-hmm. So that's been your process, and it seems to have worked out for you. Have you applied this across all your leagues that you own so far? How many leagues are you in, Bobby?
So I'm currently in 8 dynasty leagues, maybe 9. I've started to lose count. When it started to get to the point where I lost count, that's when people inviting me to new leagues, I started to say, you know what, I'm starting business school soon. It's probably not the best idea for me to join another one right now.
Absolutely. And it seems like you're very active in all across the 8 that you remember that you have right now. So you're very active.
All of them have chats too. So I'm in all of those. I'm probably the most talkative. I think everyone's just looking for me to shut up at this point.
No, man, once you are gone, we're going to miss the voice. But I bet you're going to find more time than you think you'll have. But
I certainly hope so.
We'll figure that out. So across all the leagues, what have you noticed been the common thread in how you approach Dynasty, and how did it reflect on these 8 leagues? What type of players are you looking for? What type of things that you think will lead your teams to sustain Dynasty success?
Yeah, that's a great question. I look for undervalued players, and that's I know we're probably going to get into this a little bit later, but that's part of my love for Blake Bortles. I look for players that they put up points, and for whatever reason, other people don't like them, whether it's just perception or I don't know exactly what it is. That's what I look for. So I'm always looking for the next guy that another good example that I can think of in recent history is Adam Thielen. I was pretty much all in on Adam Thielen. Not right away, but much sooner than a good amount of people. So I got a ton of cheap Adam Thielen shares in my dynasty leagues because I was willing to say, yes, he was a UDFA, but he's worked his butt off to be on this team. And when he made the team, he made good plays on special teams. Then when he made good teams on special teams, he was rewarded with more targets. And I started to see a pattern there. So then I went, this guy might be worth taking a risk on. And now a bunch of people are going, oh, what if I gave you a couple of first rounders for Adam Thielen? And I'm going, yeah, that sounds about right. Or no, I'm going to hold off and keep him on my team, and he'll help me win a few championships.
Absolutely. So what I'm hearing then is watching and paying attention to some of these trends before they become a consistent, something that you'll see every week, is something that's important for you to identify the players that you know that might break out, that you want to take a chance on.
Yeah, and I'm a big underdog guy. The first football game I ever watched, so I'm actually a Giants fan, but the first football game I ever watched was the Jets versus the Patriots. And I was watching with my brother-in-law, who's a big Patriots fan, and he told me that the Jets were terrible. So, of course, I rooted for the Jets because I always want to see the underdog win. And I've taken that same mentality and applied it to my dynasty teams, I think, which is why a lot of the players that I tend to tout, as people like to say, or talk about, tend to be unpopular because everyone's like, oh, you like that guy? Like, nobody likes that guy. Why do you like him? And sometimes it doesn't work out, but when it does work out, it makes you feel really good that you were on their side before the breakout happened.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the better feelings, to have identified someone before anyone else have. And today's fantasy football is getting a little harder with the proliferation of information, and definitely a lot more people touting all these underdogs and a whole host of them. I'm going to give a shout out to my boy Hilal. He will tout every single player, and about 2% of them work out. I'm happy for him that Jerick McKinnon's working out. But for you, it's less that shotgun approach. You have you're paying attention to several players, right? So coming into 2018, who might be someone that, I hope he's already on your team so you're not giving away any trade secrets. who might be some players that you are saying, hey, give a little more attention to? He may not have a role right now, but he's starting to earn the trust of the coaches or of his quarterback.
Yeah, someone that I'm paying attention to, and I don't know if he's earned the trust of the coaches, and I know he also just is hurt, so he's missing, I think, a week or so of preseason, but Quincy Enunwa is someone that I'm paying attention to. And I think that people forget that in 2016, even with Brandon Marshall and Eric Decker on the team, he looked to the part of a wide receiver one on a team for a little bit. I know he tapered off at the end there, and then he had the neck injury. But don't get me wrong, I love Robbie Anderson, but he can't stay out of trouble with the police or just various things, so he might get suspended. And we have no idea who Sam Darnold is going to like to target. So if Sam Darnold comes in and likes targeting Quincy Enunwa, like it's kind of like I talked about earlier. Everyone's like, it's even the exact team I mentioned earlier. Everyone's like, ew, the Jets? Why are you talking about a Jets player? But someone has to catch passes there. And I would be willing to take a bet on his price that Quincy Enunwa will catch some passes for them and even some touchdowns.
Right. And that's fair. I wasn't as on Quincy Enunwa earlier, but as I think about it more, as I'm considering his role, and like you mentioned, Robbie Anderson is a wild card whether he gets to play. Not his talent, very talented player. We have no idea what we're getting from Terrell Pryor. We saw a very good one for 1 year, but he did nothing with Washington. Hopefully he'll be a better, but Enunwa's role is special for him. And he does remind me of the same role that Sam Darnold's favorite target in USC played, Deontay Burnett, having that slot, having that quicker than fast, or that shifty guy that can take the ball in the open field and just do damage there. So I'm paying attention. You mentioned that you pay attention a lot to the Jets, right? So when do you think Darnold will get his start?
That's a very interesting question. I guess it depends on if McCown can repeat his success from last season or not. But I don't know. Living in the New York market, I'm kind of starting to buy into the rumors a bit that Darnold might actually start week one. Mm-hmm. And if he does, I would be much more excited for that than obviously watching Josh McCown again. Because I'm a Giants fan, but I do watch both the Giants and the Jets. Mm-hmm. And it'd be very interesting to see how he develops, just not even from a fan perspective, but from a fantasy perspective. I would be all over watching the Jets games to see exactly who he's targeting in those first few weeks and say, okay, he has chemistry with this guy. He doesn't have chemistry with this guy. And I'll make offers right away on whoever I think he's targeting the most whenever he starts.
Excellent. Yeah. I'm excited too. I have a few McCown shares because I think I liked what he did last year, but I'm also not expecting him to have that same type of success. It will be it'll be exciting, actually not interesting, to see Darnold and see what he can bring to that Jets team. That franchise has suffered quite some bit, but I've sidetracked a little bit, but let's come back to just focusing on another player that you think is gaining momentum quietly and that you are seeing some good things, but it's not going to be all over Twitter. It's not going to be all over certain writings of more well-known analysts. Who might that be?
Yeah, so I'm going to stick with the Jets here just because I actually hadn't thought of an answer before you said that, but as soon as you said that, so I don't know how many people outside the New York market are hearing about this guy, which is why I'm going to bring him up. But Chris Hernandez, the tight end that the Jets just drafted, is getting glowing reviews out of camp. And the Jets released Bucky Hodges, who I actually thought was going to take the job there. And then Jordan Leggett, I haven't heard anything about him since he was drafted last season. So I think Hernandez could be the tight end of the future for the Jets. And if you remember last season, ASJ played there, and he actually would have been much higher in fantasy, but he had a ton of touchdowns. I think there was like 3 or 4 that were overturned, like a ridiculous amount of touchdowns that probably should have been touchdowns that were overturned. So it could be profitable. They do have a different offensive coordinator, but it is someone that if I'm in a very, very deep dynasty league, especially let's say with taxi squads, I'm paying attention to him, and maybe he's not someone I'm willing to pick up on most of my rosters yet, but someone that I'm keeping tabs on the waiver wire. And I know I'm a crazy person, but I pay attention to people on the waiver wire that aren't on my team, and even like pretend they're on my team for a while, and then eventually I hope to pick them up.
The joy of fantasy of pretending to be a GM or a head coach. That's excellent. You brought a great smile to my face because Chris Herndon is from the University of Miami. It's a great school in pedigree for producing tight ends. I've watched him all in college. I'm excited what he can do. He is very much boom bust as far as what I've seen from him. He'll show up for a couple of games and he'll disappear. But a lot of people have said prior to the draft that he is compared very well to Charles Clay. So that's the kind of tight end I'm hoping that he'll become, and he is already on my Dynasty League. So I'm happy for you to say that.
Yeah,
Awesome.
I'm not sure fantasy owners want to hear that guys are going to become Charles Clay, but Charles Clay has been a very effective tight end for the Bills, so I'm sure the Jets would gladly take that.
Absolutely, and he may not garner the top three tight ends in the breadth of Gronkowski, Kelsey, or whoever's number three right now. Those I can never figure out, but solid. I think hopefully if he can stay healthy, solid career, and it's a good momentum going in there. Now, New York Giants also brings a smile to my face because when we're talking about underdogs, we're talking about New York Giants versus New England Patriots twice in the last decade. Those must be some enjoyable memories for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially the 2008 Super Bowl. I actually, through a weird fluke or technical glitch, I don't really know exactly what happened, but I was the only one in my entire pool to bet on the Giants in the Super Bowl.
Oh,
So I won a ton of money on the catch, as it's now called. And yeah, that was a nice little windfall for me, especially because I was just going off to college and came into like all this betting money. So I really didn't know what to do with it. But I found things to do with it in college. I'm sure you guys can all take a pretty good guess at what I did with that money. But the second game was, I guess, maybe even more enjoyable because I was watching with college friends, and my college was very split between Patriots and Giants fans. And so I had friends over that were Patriots fans, and it was nice to be able to rub it in their face directly when the Giants won.
that's all here. A little side story that I do enjoy telling is that when I got my first NFL jersey, I was looking for a Manning jersey. I was looking for Peyton Manning's jersey, and I found a Manning jersey when I knew nothing about football and bought it, wore it with pride, and noticed the Giants logo on it. It's like, okay, maybe I'll do something. That was during Eli's rookie year. So after that, I'm a honorary Giants fan, I can say, and I wore that jersey to both Super Bowl parties that I've been a part of. Speaking
Yeah,
on the
we'll
Giants,
gladly take it.
he's still there. It's still there. It's fresh. I washed it. Make sure I washed it. It's clean. Speaking of the Giants, anyone there that you think might have a sneaky good year? We know the big names already. We know that Odell is back. We know that Saquon Barkley is garnering a lot of excitement even before he played a official NFL game. Anyone else that you can think of that is now being currently overlooked but will sneak up on us?
Yeah, it's really hard to say because, as you said, they have a pretty good offense on paper. So they're going to demand targets, the guys at the top, meaning Odell, Ingram, Barkley. And then the fourth target, I think, will probably be Sterling Shepard. And I think Sterling Shepard is being overlooked a little bit. I also say that with complete bias because the only jersey that I own is a Sterling Shepard jersey, and it was because I was looking to buy a jersey, and I didn't want the stereotypical like Odell or Eli jersey, so I wanted to go a little bit different, and I really liked what I saw of Sterling Shepard in college, so I decided to get that. And when I got that jersey, he went on a streak of like 6 games where he either had 50 receiving yards or a touchdown in every single one of those games. It eventually stopped, but the jersey seemed like good luck, so I continue to root for Sterling Shepard. And I think people are maybe overestimating, and I might actually make this my next article, but I think they're overestimating how many targets are going to those top 3 guys. We have a tendency to do that as fantasy people. We think all the targets are going to the top guys, forgetting that in like real football, the ball is spread out much more than that, and that some of those ancillary pieces do actually get targets. I'm not saying Sterling Shepard's going to get like 100 targets, but I could see him still getting somewhere in like the 70 to 80 range. And if he does that, he'll be I'm not a decent fantasy option. I'm not going to say he's going to be an amazing fantasy option, but I do think compared to what he could be, he's being overlooked a bit.
I'm glad you said that. It's a lot of times I do have problems with fantasy owners. It's they want the all or nothing approach, looking at how targets are distributed. They want to know if someone's the best the targeted player in their team or the best volume, but in reality, things are spread a bit around more, and they can become value because one game or two games you might see Sterling leading over Odell. Odell might be double covered, so that leaves a lot of open targets going elsewhere, and I'm hoping Eli is going to have a bounce back. I'm still a fan of his, despite all the turnover career that's marred his career in the last few. How many years has it been since we saw an exciting Eli?
So how many years? He's probably been on. I'd say he's been declining since that last Super Bowl win in 2012. So it's been a few years since we've seen really good play out of Eli. And even then, there are people that make the argument that he was dragged to that Super Bowl win by the defense. I'm not looking to start a huge debate on your podcast, but I will say that I think Eli was still pretty good in 2012. But since then, I will definitely agree with people that say he's been declining more or less every year since.
Mm-hmm. Do you think the future quarterback is on the team right now?
I hope so, but I think the answer is no. So I was very vocal about having a quarterback taken at 2. I got in a lot of fights with friends and family about it because they didn't understand and they all wanted either Saquon or someone else, and they were super excited when Saquon was picked. And I had to explain to them why it was bad from like a contract cap perspective, and they didn't understand that. And I just got mad. So I tried not talking about it for a bit. I've gotten on board with Saquon because he's a special talent and he's on the team now, so there's nothing I can do about it.
Mm-hmm.
But I was very much advocating for Josh Rosen at number 2, and I'm still upset that he's not on the team.
Josh Rosen, he was my favorite quarterback coming into this draft. And everything that you said made complete sense from a football perspective. Not to say that Saquon isn't good, isn't going to be amazing, but when it comes to how fantasy organization runs, there are certain things that we know that will have success. Will get the team back on a successful path. But that's beside the point here. As we are ready to dive into the dynasty, so maybe it's not unrelated, but it's still. We want to focus on the statistics. We want to focus on things that make our team strong, and that is whatever they produce on the field on Thursday, Sunday, and Monday night. Bobby, I really appreciate you coming on to discuss your Dynasty Mind. But before I let you go, there's a ton of things, and this is how I know people really love you, is I just retweeted and asked them, what is 3 words that describes Bobby or Rec Fantasy? And I've got a ton of reply. I'm going to read, if I have time. Wow, it's a lot. I might just read some and not all of them, but you have to explain to me what some of these mean. So
Sure.
At the first one, at M. Giraldi tweeted in, soup in summer.
So the explanation for that is on my podcast, the Afterburners podcast. The reason it's called the Afterburners is because at the end of the show each week, we do a burn of the week, me and my co-host and whatever guest we have on. And I was earlier that day on one of the podcasts I was recording, I was talking to one of my friends, and it was 90 degrees out, and he mentioned that he was eating soup for lunch, and I called him a psychopath. And then we got into this huge debate about whether it was okay to eat hot soup in the summer. I created a Twitter poll about it, and I got in like a bunch of like kind of fake Twitter arguments with people. And more or less, it boils down to, I think that you're a psychopath if you enjoy hot soup in the summer.
Oh, I have to say, I don't really particularly enjoy soup when it's already hot. So I can
that's smart.
I can get on your side on that. All right, so Josh Brickner tweeted in, hashtag the Blake virus host.
Yeah, these are all pretty much related to the Afterburners podcast, at least in some way. So I'm known for liking Blake Bortles to an nth degree. For a while, he was actually in my Twitter profile, and I took him out to mention that I was married to my wife. And then my wife, in her Twitter profile, put Blake Bortles in and Spider-Man, which is what I took out of mine to put that I was married to her. She's definitely a good wife, but the Blake is essentially an inside joke started spreading around. I met some guys from fantasy football Twitter, and we actually hung out. And then a few days later, one of them traded for Blake Bortles. So they were joking around that I was like spreading this disease of the Blake. And on Afterburners Pod, we actually titled it the Blake and said that if you talk to me, you capture the Blake. And it gets a little, I don't know, I don't want to get too inappropriate for your podcast. It gets a little more inappropriate than that. But if you want to check out the Afterburners episode with Jeff Miller, that features the Blake on it.
Oh gosh, Jeff will get us talking about a lot of things that might not be safe for a lot of ears.
Yeah, that's certainly true.
All right, so Spoonie, I love Spoonie. He always tweet at me and always respectful and very, very fun guy to talk with on Twitter. His tweet is soup, shorts, and Sammy.
The soup thing is the thing I already explained. Shorts is, and it's funny because, so again, on my podcast, one of my, I guess, not even a burn, I just started off the episode by mentioning I don't really like wearing shorts. And since then, I've worn exclusively shorts. Sammy is that I'm seen as a Sammy hater.
Oh.
And it's not necessarily true. I just don't like Sammy at his price. I always root for players to do well. I never root against a player to prove my take right. But Sammy Watkins is overpriced for the production that he's shown fantasy-wise, in my opinion. I wrote an article about it. It started a lot of debate on Twitter. Some of it was nice debate and civilized. Some of it was not so nice debate. So now I'm known as a guy who doesn't like Sammy, and pretty much anytime Sammy does anything well or there's press about Sammy, someone tags me in it.
Oh man, I am in the same boat as you. I get tons of those tweets of those gifs of how, oh my gosh, he is doing amazing against air in 7-on-7 training camp. I'm just like, okay.
Yeah, that's exactly how I feel about it. I said, let's see how he does at the end of the season, then we'll talk.
And unfortunately, and I never want to take victory laps because a player got hurt, but we already hearing hip concerns.
Yeah, and my concern more, just to sum it up really quickly, is that Patrick Mahomes is more or less a rookie quarterback. I know it's his second year, but he didn't really play last season minus that one game. And Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce are already there, and Kareem Hunt is there, people who already know the offense well. And so I just don't, I know they gave him all this money, but I just don't necessarily, there has to be a lot that goes right, which is Sammy stays healthy, he becomes Mahomes' favorite target, and all of this other stuff. And I wrote an article about it if people want to check it out.
Yes.
It's on Dynasty League Football. It's called Turn Down What. It's a play on that song, Turn Down for What. And you can check that out and list all my reasons of why I don't like Sammy Watkins at his price.
Yes, please check it out. Bobby has made really arguments, and at least it'll get you to think, and that's what we need you to do as fantasy owners, to start thinking for yourself and not just buy into whatever's being posted on 150 characters. Is it more than 100? It's more than 150 characters nowadays.
It's 180 now, I believe.
Oh my gosh.
280?
Yeah, 280, I think. It was there. That was in the part hotly discussed topic when Twitter went that direction. Okay, so we got several repeats of the 3 words to describe Bobby. So I'll read off Zach Reed's Tacit Assassin and James Cutula's. Oh, I'm sorry, not Cutula's. We'll read Cutula's later. But Dynasty Outhouse. Twitter tough guy. You got 3 exclamation mark for that.
Yeah, that's just because, so my handle on Twitter is Wrecked Fantasy, and John Bosch and Leo P liked to call me the Twitter tough guy because they think it's basically, this is something that's followed me wherever I've gone. I've interned some places and people are like, Bobby's too nice. So he's so nice that we like to pretend that like he leaves work and he goes and like murders people or like he's a gangster rapper on the side or something. So that's more or less what this is. Like they like call me the Twitter tough guy because I'm the complete opposite of a Twitter tough guy. At least I like to think so. I don't like think I act like a Twitter tough guy. I'm not like one of those guys who sits behind a keyboard and like calls people out and says I'll fight them, because I don't know how many people watch on your feed or channel or the video, but if you look at me, I'm not fighting anyone. I'm not tough. I will not fight you.
Oh, okay, so that explains the other two that we got from Devi Distributor and Tim Turner. Both say that you're kind, funny, reliable, but you have to explain what Ron Dynasty mean when he says Anna Kendrick's superfan.
Yeah, that one, I guess it's not untrue. I love Anna Kendrick. She's probably my number one celebrity crush,
Awesome.
at least these days. And that one was, I was helping Kylo Rebeck of the Dynasty Dummies get to 1,000 followers. And so for a few days, Kyle, just to give people a little background into the way my mind works, Kyle is from Maine and Anna Kendrick is from Maine. And I figured a bunch of like fantasy guys would like seeing gifs of Anna Kendrick. So I'd be like, you should follow Kyle Lebrecht because he's from the same place that Anna Kendrick is. Isn't that right, Anna? And it'd be like a gif of Anna winking at you. I mean, it eventually worked. He eventually got to 1,000. So I feel like my job was done.
Wow. Oh man, that is quite the story. That is awesome. Well, Bobby, the last one, I always want to give a shout out to Casey, who's also been on the Dynasty Mind. She mentioned the three things that she described you is dogs, dogs, dogs. And I'm thinking she's your dog.
Yeah, we talk about our dogs pretty much constantly. Like if you look at Casey and I's either DMs or just Twitter notifications, it's not so much football and more or less just talking about our dogs. Occasionally, we'll start a Twitter thread of just posting pictures of our dogs. It includes Gianna. It includes George Krikos. I apologize if I butchered your last name, George.
It's okay.
It also includes Sal Stefanale and Jeff Miller, as well as a few others. Sometimes people just see us posting pictures of our dogs, and it becomes like anyone who's in fantasy and has dogs just starts joining in and posting pictures. That's actually my favorite whenever that happens. Whenever random people start posting pictures of their dogs, I'm like, this is great. I don't need Twitter for anything else, just dog pictures.
Oh, man. I agree. That's awesome to connect with. I think sometimes step away a little bit from the football talk and enjoy life, and what's better than having a dog in our lives. Well, Bobby.
Absolutely. And it's nice to, sorry to interrupt. No. I was just going to say it's nice to connect with other guys or girls who like fantasy and also be able to talk to them about stuff that's not just football. So it's nice to be able to talk about dogs or comics or whatever else I like, in this case, whatever else you might like.
Awesome. Well, yes. Well, thank you so much for joining me, Bobby. I think our audience really benefited a lot from digging into your Dynasty Mind, digging into your process, and also getting to know you much better. I hope we will continue to see your presence on Twitter. I'm sure you'll find some time to do some discussion. But
yeah, I'll be around when I can, and I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, if nothing else, we will always root for Blake Bortles. Every time Blake Bortles does something good, we'll always remember you.
Sounds good. Yeah, you can always tweet at me if Blake Bortles does something. I'm happy to talk about it.
Awesome. Okay, why don't you let people know where they can find you, how they can get in touch with you, and I'm sure you already repeated some of this information, but it would be great for them to just know how, if they can just slide into your DM sometimes.
Yeah, sure. You can find me at Rekt Fantasy. That's REKED Fantasy. As I mentioned earlier, I'm not a Twitter tough guy, despite what John Bosch says. You can find my work at Dynasty League Football, as well as Two Quarterbacks. And you can also find me on the Afterburners Pod, which is at Afterburners Pod on Twitter.
Awesome. Thank you, folks, for joining us. This has been another episode of A Dynasty Mind. Have a good day.